Coming to you live from our broadcast studio here at the WeWork building in Sandton, Johannesburg. Welcome to the South African launch of the magnificent book series, Remembering Wildlife. My name is Boo Prince. I'll be your host for the next hour as we explore the extraordinary world of some of the most iconic creatures on our beautiful planet and the fate that they are facing and the role that each of us can play in preserving not only their habitats, but the animals themselves. I'd like to introduce you to an absolutely extraordinary lady who has dedicated her life to conservation and using this magnificent series of books, the Remembering Wildlife series, to not only raise awareness, but also to raise incredible funds that then get donated to conservation causes. I would like to introduce you to Margot Raggett. Margot, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you because, of course, this has turned into your life's work, this Remembering Wildlife series. Can you give us just a touch of insight into your life before you became a conservationist? Because it's been a radical change in your life.
Sure. Yeah, nice to see you. Thank you for hosting this for us, Boo. Yes, I was nothing to do with wildlife or conservation. I lived and worked in London for 20 years, running a big PR agency here, and started traveling on safari and then started trying to build a world in wildlife photography about 10 years ago. But it was 6 years ago that I actually saw a poached elephant, and that changed everything for me. I was so shocked at the sight and the smell of this poor elephant, and it still had a poisoned arrow in him, that I just thought I have to do something about this poaching crisis. And I thought, I don't think enough people, particularly outside of Africa, really understand quite how bad it is, and you know, what can I do to help?
So Margot, most people don't actually have that kind of extraordinarily visceral experience, but equally, anybody who does choose to support a conservation cause or devote some of their life's work to conservation, they seldom make as radical a change as you have done. And you've jumped in boots and all. How did you conceptualize this remarkable Remembering Wildlife series?
Well, I'd love to claim it was a well thought out long-term strategy, but it's evolved as we've gone through. So to start with, I just thought I want to raise awareness of elephant poaching, and maybe I can do an exhibition, maybe I can do a book, maybe I can do both. So I spent a few months kind of deliberating as to what to do, and concluded that a book was a good thing to do. And then I thought, well, actually, I want to try and get as many photographers as I can to contribute to this book, because certainly I don't have, enough pictures that would be a best-selling book. But I knew if I could get everyone together, and the quality of the photographers, as you'll get to experience with some of the guys you're going to meet tonight, if they all work with me, then we'll have something quite special. So I started in those early days just reaching out to anyone I knew. So actually, one of the very first people I got in touch with was Daryl, who I'd randomly been on a plane with from Samburu to the Mara, I think. And I just recognized what he looked like and went up to him very shyly and said, "Are you Daryl?" And he was lovely, and we had a chat. So then I knew he was nice. So when we started this, he was one of the first people that I spoke to. But it just kind of evolved. And when we got to the point that Remembering Elephants launched, I wasn't sure how successful it would be or how popular. And people just loved the idea. They embraced it. Everyone wanted to be involved. Everyone was offering to help. And then everyone started saying, well, you've got to do another one. And I really, at that point, was thinking, do I? This was a year of my life doing this book. I wasn't sure that I wanted to do more than one. But I then actually spent some time with a northern white rhino, the last male northern white rhino called Sudan up in El Pejeta. He's subsequently passed away, no longer with us, sadly. But seeing him just made me realize again that, rhinos were also in trouble and they deserved a book too. We've been going ever since.
Now, Margot, we are going to be speaking to Daryl Balfour in just a moment. I do want to mention to you, Margot, that there's no such thing as a random meeting, right? You think it's a random meeting, but it's somehow written in the stars that you guys should meet and collaborate on this extraordinary series of books. And if my understanding is correct, Daryl has contributed to more than just the elephant books in the Remembering Wildlife series. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I think Daryl's actually contributed to every single book, and been an enormous supporter. And I sometimes I get kind of a bit down, and I think, oh, is this achieving anything, or are people still keen? And Daryl always, as do all the guys on this call, rally me along. So I'm very grateful to his and everyone's support.
Now, Margot, your mission in this is not just to raise awareness, and not just to sell books, but in fact to sell those books with the purpose of raising funds to donate to conservation. Can you put a figure on that? How successful has that been up until this point?
Yeah, I think actually we wrote it in the write-up for this broadcast in Rand, because I can't remember. It's over $800,000 US.
Yeah, I do know, because it's a staggering sum. But in fact, my notes tell me that you have donated in excess of 13.5 million Rand to conservation, which is simply extraordinary. And of course, there are going to be so many people watching tonight who are inspired by this and who would love to purchase these books. But they're also going to be asking themselves, well, how do you select which organizations you donate the money to?
Sure. Again, that's been an evolutionary process. So I started in the early few books. I partnered with the Born Free Foundation in the UK, who I had been supporting with images of my own for a while. And they were a great partner to begin with, because they were able to give me advice on the projects that they already had identified and supported. But as time has gone on, I wanted more independence and more freedom to choose the projects that meant the most to me. So quite often they're recommended to me by people that are involved in the project. So various photographers, including Daryl, has suggested. We just supported the Nyasa Lion project, which is one that is very close to Daryl's heart, and he had recommended that to me. So Jonathan and Angela Scott have been enormous mentors to me and worked in conservation forever. So they often put forward organisations such as the Cheetah Conservation Fund, who we're going to be supporting with this year's forthcoming Remembering Cheetahs, which isn't out yet, but will be in the autumn. And then I do my due diligence as well. So, I check up a lot of them, I ask around, and I do go and try and visit projects. It's not easy, as I'm based in the UK, but I try and get out a couple of times a year to visit projects. So I was just in Namibia now visiting a couple of cheetah projects to make sure that I felt that their work is something we wanted to support.
Okay, and we are going to discuss towards the end of this broadcast a little bit more about the Remembering Cheetahs book. That one is not out yet. However, tonight marks the launch of the Remembering Wildlife series being available in South Africa. And that means that you are now able to purchase one of these magnificent books. There is Remembering Elephants, Remembering Lions, Remembering Rhinos, and Remembering Great Apes. Without further ado, I would love to, Margot, introduce our audiences to some of these fantastic photographers who have so generously donated their work and given us an opportunity to really get some unique insights into the lives of these absolutely iconic animals. So let's start by meeting Daryl Balfour. Now, Daryl, Daryl and I, in many ways, go way back because we've shared broadcasts and I've interviewed him and so on, but Daryl and I have never actually met face to face, which seems a crime after all these years. But Daryl is an absolutely legendary photographer and conservationist, and has written many books of his own as well. And Daryl, you also work very closely with your wife, Shana, is my understanding. You're both dedicated conservationists and photographers, and you also take lucky people all around the world to experience some of your photographic safaris. So welcome and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Boo. Good to see you face to face, if not meet you face to face.
Exactly, exactly. Now, Daryl, tell us a little bit about your journey with elephants, because I know that you have been taking photographs of all kinds of iconic African animals, you know, as they say, since Pa fell off the bus. But it took you many, many years to capture this iconic sequence, which is in the Remembering Elephants book, of a matriarch giving birth to a baby elephant. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? Because it must have been extraordinary for you.
Yeah, Boo, my journey with elephants began because I love working on foot. I like walking with animals, and obviously elephants and rhinos are the best animals to walk with. So I've spent many, many years and hundreds, thousands of hours photographing elephants. And the one thing that always eluded me was a birth. Shana and I worked on our book on elephants, African elephants, a celebration of majesty, for 4 years back in the early 90s. And the one thing we really, really wanted for that book was to photograph a birth. And unfortunately, that eluded us until I was on safari in the summer of 2010. So the elephant book was early 90s. It was a long way to this 25 years of elephant photography, basically, before I happened to come across this elephant. One morning, there was a herd of them out in the plains in Mombo, Botswana. And the herd was happily grazing, and I suddenly noticed one of the cars in the background behaving strangely. And I said to the guide who was driving us around, I said, hang on, there's something happening here. Let's just watch that car. And sure enough, within minutes, I said to him, she's going to give birth. And the next thing, there it was happening right in front of us. Early summer, short green grass, out in the open. And it was just an absolutely momentous occasion. And I had clients with me, had been on many, many safaris, and it was really fantastic, share it with them. But at the same time, I really felt heartsick and heartsore that Shana wasn't with me, because it was something we both always wanted to capture. And you know, to capture that, any birth, I suppose any birth is something special to watch, but to watch an elephant giving birth and then see the interaction, the whole herd gathering around, all helping, all trumpeting, and the other calves in the herd sort of crawling through underneath the adults to get as close as they could to the newborn and reach out with their trunks and touch it. And then these other calves going down on their knees and trying to help this little guy up to his feet. It was just so amazing and so moving.
I love that story, Daryl. That is just incredible, because, you know, aside from anything else, I think one of the things that is so profound for me about the bush is that it's always different. You know, I mean, just listening to your story, I think it brings home that one can be on safari, you can go on game drives, you can walk in the bush for years and years and years, and every occasion will be different. And as long as you pay attention, you're always going to see something new. And it brings home for me how extraordinarily important it is for us to be able to preserve wild places and wild creatures.
Yeah, but I'm sure every one of the guys who's going to be talking after me tonight will say the same thing, that no 2 days in the wilderness are ever the same. And I've been doing this professionally for more than 3 decades now, and I'm excited every single day I go out, because I know that I'm going to see something I haven't seen before, more times than not.
Daryl, just very, very briefly, I mean, one of the things that most people don't know about you is you are one of the few people in the world who has actually been trampled by an elephant and survived the encounter. And yet you're not a person that holds a grudge against the elephant or otherwise. You are still wholeheartedly in love with these magnificent, iconic beasts, and still taking photographs of them whenever you can. Can you give us a little insight into that story, because it is a cracker?
Yeah, but it was back in December 1992. Sean and I were doing our book on elephants in the Kruger Park. We did have permission to be out walking by ourselves, and we've been looking for a particular elephant known as Chokwan, who was one of the great tuskers of that era. And this one morning in particular, I found him. It was the first time we went looking for him, and within an hour of setting off to look for him, we got some information as to where to look. I spotted this big guy off in the veld. We walked out. Well, in fact, I walked out. Shauna didn't accompany on the walk that morning. And I walked out, and sure enough, it was Chokwan. I started photographing him. He made a series of mock charges, which I should have paid more attention to, but after he had done his mock charges, he wandered off and started feeding. And I made I can't quite say fatal, but almost fatal mistake of going back and just trying to get one more shot. And I think every photographer will identify with that one more shot feeling, just one more shot. And I think Chokwan looked at me and said, "I thought I'd already told you to get out of here." And he came and almost took me out.
Wow.
But yeah, I survived.
You did. And it just, thank goodness.
It just deepened my resolve to do something for elephants and deepen my passion for them.
Thank you so much, Daryl. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And of course, you can see Daryl's magnificent work, not only with elephants, but Daryl has contributed photos to every single book in the Remembering Wildlife series. And so you can see his work in those books. We're going to be moving on to our next photographer. Thank you so much, Daryl, for joining us. Johan Marais is an extraordinary photographer in his own right, but he is also a wildlife vet, and he is also the founder of Saving the Survivors. He donated an incredibly rare picture of a Sumatran rhino from Malaysian Borneo to Remembering Rhinos. Welcome, Johan, and thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Good evening, Boo, and good evening to all the viewers. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Johan, tell me the story about this incredible photo that everyone can see. It is absolutely astonishing. And of course, these are not African rhinos. These are not rhinos that we know from the South African bush.
Yeah, exactly, Boo. So I think we were, very fortunate and very blessed. About 3 years ago, we got a call from Malaysian Borneo to say there's a very sick female Sumatran rhino in that area. At the time, there was only about 3 rhino in that specific area that was taken out of the wild, and they were trying to breed from these rhino. And there's one female called Puntung was really, really sick, and she had this huge growth on the left side of her face. So when we got the call, we immediately, made plans, and we flew to this area, and we went to look at her. Unfortunately, in the end, it turned out to be a really bad cancer of the upper jaw, and eventually she had to be put down. However, the other female that was there was completely fine, and she was doing well. But then this male was the only male that was there, and he was also doing really well. And on one afternoon, we actually went into the rainforest to photograph him, and he was called Kertam. And it was an amazing experience to actually go into that rainforest and to and to be able to be in the near vicinity of him, and to be able to take these photographs of these amazingly rare, Sumatran rhino. Currently, there's only about less than 80 of them in the world. If we talk about, black rhino, there's about 4,500 left. If we talk about white rhino, there's about between 12 and 15,000 left. And if you talk about these, this amazing species, there's only less than 80 of them left in the entire world. So it was an incredible experience to get so close to him and to be able to take these photographs of him. Sadly, though, last year he developed really bad kidney and liver damage. And I think it was in May last year that he unfortunately also passed away.
Wow. I think sometimes for people who don't have the opportunity to get out into the bush and actually get really close to these animals, they may not completely understand that sort of visceral emotional connection that you have with an animal when you get up close to it. And I can imagine that your emotions must be very, very intense when you are photographing a creature that your photos may be amongst the last photos ever taken of the species because they are facing extinction. I mean, when there's only 80 of you left in the world, your numbers are not looking promising.
Yeah, Bruno, absolutely. I must say, that probably ranks as one of my two top experiences, ever of the photographs, that I've taken. To be able to come that close to a species of which there are only 60 to 80 in the wild left, and it's not easy to actually see them and to photograph them. Was an incredibly emotional experience, to walk with him in the wild. And, the other thing which makes them extremely special as well is they're very, very vocal. If you compare them, for instance, to black rhino or even to our white rhino in South Africa, they are probably 60-70% more vocal, so they make this high-pitched sound all the time, when they walk in the bush or, when they're in the vicinity of each other. And, just that, to have experienced that was incredibly special.
Now, Johan, very well you're not getting away without making rhino sounds for me. Hey. Come on. Let your inner Sumatran rhino out.
It's a very, very special, very high-pitched sound. And, people that have ever heard, whales, the recordings, it sounds very, very similar. It's a very high-pitched sound, which, the first time you hear it, you go, no, this is a 2-ton or a 1.5-ton animal. Surely they cannot make that sound. But it's very similar to whales.
It's fascinating, this idea around vocalization, because of course in the average human being we associate high-pitched noises with being small and young, and that's definitely not the case in with whales and, surprise, surprise, who knew, rhinos.
Exactly. I think the other the other time which I heard these incredible amount of vocalization was in the Congo, where we visit a place called Zanga Zanga Bay, where there were about 120, 150 elephants. And it's probably the only place in the world which I've visited where I've heard that many vocalizations between elephant. I've never, ever heard it anywhere else. But, to come back to the Sumatran rhino, it was really incredible. And to have the support from Margot and from the Remembering Rhino launch and, the book series, really helped us, to support these rhino and rhino after that, going forward with these incredible, injuries that they still experience up till this day as a result of poaching, unfortunately.
Well, that's actually exactly what I wanted to ask you about, Johan, because you're not only a photographer, and a brilliant photographer at that, but you're also a wildlife vet. And I know that you do significant work with rhinos that have been injured or damaged through the process of attempted poachings, for instance, because obviously if the poaching is successful, the rhino does actually die, which is too tragic for speech. But your organization is saving the survivors. Tell me a little bit about the process of what you go through in terms of being able to rehabilitate some of those animals.
Yeah, it's quite intense. So we started saving survivors in about 2012. So it's been running about 8 years, and it was basically started with the aim of looking after and caring for these badly injured rhino, mostly white rhino, because there were so many of them at the time that got poached, and the injuries we mainly dealt with were gunshot injuries. And then the ones that were really intense and that are still intense and horrific is where they shoot an animal, mostly through the chest, which they survive, by the way, which is also incredible. But that shot actually stuns the animal, so they're down for about 5 to 10 minutes. And in that period, they chop off the horn, and often they use a chainsaw. And unfortunately, there's a belief in some of the people that the horn grows to below the skin surface. So what they do is they remove as much of the top part of the face as possible. So you get these rhino that are left with a third of their face being removed. And often they just miss, the eyes when they do these hackings or they use chainsaws. So these are really, really large injuries. Often they are about 40 centimeters by 60 centimeters big. They roar, they go right into your paranasal sinuses. And the very first time I was called in the Eastern Cape to treat one of these rhino, they sent me photos of it, and I had a look at it, and I went, there is just no way. There is no way that anyone can treat this, this rhino successfully. The vet then phoned me and said, you know what, we're going to actually put her down. So if you come down and just try, at least we give her a chance, which is very true. And I think with that, we've been successful in quite a number of other injuries where you go, well, this rhino is probably going to die anyhow. So what do we lose if we just try and save it? And that first rhino was called Hope. And, I think there's a lot of people that still know Hope. Where a massive amount. Yes, exactly. Where a massive amount of her, of the dorsum of her face were removed. And she taught us a massive amount of what we can do, what we can achieve, and how we can actually heal these injuries. Unfortunately, she died about 2 years later, not because of the face injury, but because of an intestinal infection, that they sometimes get. Just after her death, we actually got a bull called Saya that had a very similar injury, and that he's still alive, and he's doing very well. Last year just before last year, we put him to 2 cows, and he actually sired a calf, which was born last year, called Daniel. And I think that's the whole crux of trying to heal these rhino, Boo, is to, it's not for these animals to go back into a zoo or a cage and people to look at them and go, oh, shame, let's see how they look or so on. It's for for us to be able to give these animals a second lease of life on life, and then for them to go back into the wild to be able to reproduce again and add to the survival of the species. And I think we've been fairly successful. There's still a couple of things that we struggle with, and challenges we have just because of the size of this animal, and because these are wild animals. But I think we've been very successful in the last 8 years. And again, I must say, thank you very much to Margot and her support, towards saving survivors, because I think it made a massive difference.
Well, Johan, thank you so much for the incredible work that you do, as I say, not just as a photographer, but your work through saving the survivors. It is absolutely extraordinary. And for anybody watching, if you have just joined us, welcome to the broadcast. Tonight we are celebrating the South African launch of an incredible series of books called Remembering Wildlife. And yes, we have just been talking about the horrors of poaching and so on, but I can assure you that the books are absolutely incredible. Magnificent photography from some of the world's finest photographers, and also including photographs from many of our local South African photographers. We have such a profound talent pool in this country, and people just spending a lot of time in the bush, on the ground, and capturing some truly extraordinary moments. And of course, all of the profits from the sale of any of the Remembering Wildlife books goes directly back into conservation. So if you are somebody who cares a great deal about animals and about wild places, like I do, one of the easiest ways that you can have an impact is to get your hands on one of these magnificent books, and you will be supporting organizations like Johan Marais' Saving the Survivors organization, which is partially funded by the proceeds of these books. And so even when, as he was saying, even when a rhino has been gravely injured through an attempted poaching, they can still help the animal, and they can, in many cases, rehabilitate them, which is absolutely extraordinary. Now, of course, one of the other creatures which is absolutely iconic is the mountain gorilla. Now, I was very fortunate in 2004 to spend some time in Rwanda with the mountain gorillas, and it was really a life-changing experience, is the only way that I can put it to you. Now, the Remembering Wildlife, Remembering Great Apes book in the series is one that celebrates all the great apes. So we're looking at chimpanzees, we're looking at mountain gorillas, lowland gorillas, as well as orangutans. And this book is probably best characterized by the most extraordinary photo on the front cover. Now, that photo was taken by our next photographer, who I'm going to introduce you to, and his name is Nelis Wolmarans. Now, Nelis donated this extraordinary image that was used for the cover of Remembering Great Apes. And my understanding is that Nelis had a remarkable relationship with that particular gorilla on the cover of the book. Welcome, Nelis. It's wonderful to speak to you and wonderful to meet you. Thank you for being with us.
Boo, thank you so much, and also welcome to all the viewers. Truly remarkable animal, the silverback on the front cover.
So, am I correct that his name was Muninya?
That's correct, yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with Muninya and what that meant to you, and how it all started.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the front cover of the book is a mountain gorilla silverback called Muninya, the dominant silverback of a family called Hirwa. And it's probably one of the families that I've visited most in the time that I spent up in Rwanda. And I think, one of the things, besides his sheer size, it's just a really intimidating size. I think one of the things that really stood out for me about him, it was his characteristic, just such a gentle creature, and really a gentle giant in every sense of the word. So many of the tracks I've done up there, you would find Mouninho sitting there, surrounded by the youngsters. Incredible love for the little ones, and you could see it wasn't just that he felt like he had to protect the youngsters. He was you loved playing with them. You constantly see him rolling around with them. Incredible to watch. So, as far as characteristics that really stood out for me was his love for the family. Really, really great father.
Now, Nelis, your stories about Mouninho just resonate so deeply with me, because when I was fortunate enough to go and visit the mountain gorillas in Virunga in 2004, that was precisely my impression as well, was that I just remember lying in sort of this undergrowth area and watching this magnificent silverback and just being so struck by the fact that he wasn't actually kind of, that stereotypical dominant kind of trying to assert himself over everyone around him the whole time at all.
Exactly.
He was a silverback that took great interest in the children. And I remember so clearly this particular silverback that I was watching, he picked up a twig that had a tiny little chameleon on it. And I thought to myself, oh, he's going to eat it. He's going to eat it. He's going to eat it. But he didn't. He just sat there with that twig, watching that chameleon for probably 5 minutes. And I just thought, you can't help seeing them as almost human, because they just do have that kind of curiosity and so many characteristics that really resonate with us as human beings. Can you tell me any stories that particularly stayed with you about Mouninho?
Yeah, besides being a really great father, I think he was also very trusting of people, and obviously something that had built up over the years. Mouninho originated from the Sousa family, which was one of the oldest families in the Virungas. It was studied by Diane, and Mouninho was a real ladies' man, and he always got into trouble with the dominant silverback of the Sousa family, Corrida, for cheating with the females. The females, they're very promiscuous, and if they think number 2 or 3 silverback is better looking, they're going to cheat, and that didn't sit well with Corrida. So in 2002, Mouninho packed up and he disappeared for 4 years. And then I think it was 17th of June 2006, he appeared on the other side of Volcanoes National Park, close to the area below Sabine volcano, with several females. And and that's where he started, the family that we know today. Interesting stories. Like I said, very, very trusting. On one of the tracks I did, halfway through our trek with the gorillas, with the Mouninho's family Hirwa, it started bucketing down when we had really, really heavy rain. And I said to the lead guide, I said to him, listen, it might be best if we just, for the second half of the trek, let's move away, let's find some cover, and then come back to the gorillas on the, for the second half, once the rain has, given us a bit of a break. And so we moved off well out of sight of the gorillas, and we found a lovely canopy under, one of a thick canopy, and that's where we sat. And I promise you, we weren't sitting there for any longer than maybe 5 minutes. And the whole family, Mouninho in front, brought the whole family to come and join under that tree canopy. There was nowhere for us to back off. And so we just sat, took the guide's instructions. And I promise you, you literally couldn't put your hand out in any direction without, touching a gorilla. So we all just sat there and we waited out the rain. And there was just such an amazing way of ending our last half an hour with that family.
Wow, what a story. That is absolutely extraordinary. But now, Nelis, my understanding is that Mouninho is sadly no longer with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened to him?
Yeah, Boo, it was towards the end of last year, Mouninho took the family across from Volcanoes National Park in Rwanda, across into Mugahinga National Park on the Uganda side. Obviously, they don't need passports, so it's a quick and easy transition. And so, unfortunately, it had devastating consequences. They were there for, I think, just over a month, maybe 2 months, and the family got struck by lightning, which, a number of the family members, got killed in that lightning strike. And then before returning, I think the trackers on the Mogahinga side, Uganda side, notified the gorilla vets, that the gorilla doctors, that Moninia was having a respiratory problem. And, the gorilla vets are a phenomenal worker. And they spent quite a bit of time going backwards and forward, monitoring him. And it sounded like his condition started improving at one stage. They were with him pretty much through most of January. And then towards the end of January, it looked like the condition came back and it worsened. And in February, he passed away from respiratory complications. Big loss.
But of course, his image is magnificently preserved on the cover.
No, absolutely. I think the book will definitely keep his memory alive.
And Nelis, tell me, what has it meant for you to be part of the Remembering Wildlife journey? Because, I mean, these are not just kind of your average wildlife book. I mean, I know that Margot set out to create the best book about each of these iconic species, literally the best book ever created. Tell me a little bit about your experience with the Remembering Wildlife journey and what it's meant to you.
Yeah, look, I can definitely echo that. It's definitely, one of the best quality books, wildlife books that I've ever come across. And, when you spend so much time on the ground with, the people on the ground and the organizations that look after the gorillas and do their best to keep alive and make sure they, their numbers increase. You see some of the struggles that come about, and to me, the book has definitely, helped so much. It has really not only assisted with funding for a lot of these organizations, but also it has created much needed awareness for the mountain gorillas and great apes in general.
Fantastic. And of course, when we think of great apes in general and chimpanzees specifically, one cannot help thinking of the iconic Dame Jane Goodall. And of course, Jane Goodall lent her voice to the Remembering Wildlife series as well, because she in fact wrote the foreword to the Remembering Great Apes book. And I mean, I was very, very fortunate to spend some time with Jane Goodall at her home last year in Tanzania. And I can tell you that she is just as feisty and committed to conserving wild places and iconic animals as she ever was, even back in the 60s, when she completely revolutionized our understanding of the great apes and our relationship to them in terms of how biologically similar we are to them. And also our understanding of these magnificent animals as having complex and just really emotional lives and societies and family connections and so on. So it's really amazing to see all these things represented in a book like Remembering Wildlife, so beautifully preserved. And as I said right in the beginning, and Nelis, you can talk a little bit more about this as well, is that the Remembering Great Apes book is not just about mountain gorillas or just about chimpanzees. It covers all the great apes. So there are some extraordinary pictures in there, also of animals like the orangutans, for example. And Nelis, I'm sure it's been thrilling for you to be, featured in a book alongside some of these extraordinary international photographers from around the world who've contributed such amazing images as well.
Yeah, I know, an absolute privilege, and it's really been an honor to showcase, and especially Moninia, the silverback we're talking about, having him on the front cover really meant a lot to me. I've unfortunately not yet had the privilege of meeting Jane Goodall, but never know. Hopefully somewhere along the line.
I can tell you, Nelis, she knows your work. Because there's no ways that she wrote the foreword to the book and she hasn't paid, a lot of attention to the cover. So yeah, she knows your work. Nelis, thank you so much for being with us. That's wildlife photographer Nelis Wolmarans, who contributed the magnificent picture of Muninya, the beautiful silverback gorilla on the cover of Remembering Great Apes. Now, we are going to introduce you to another fantastic photographer, and this time we're going to be talking about the king of the jungle. In the Remembering Wildlife series, of course, we have Remembering Great Apes, Remembering Elephants, Remembering Rhinos, and Remembering Lions. And the photographer I would like to introduce you to right now is Marlon de Toit. And Marlon has a very special story to tell about a very special male lion by the name of Scar. Thank you so much for joining us, Marlon. I'm thrilled to meet you and very keen to hear all about your relationship with Scar.
Thank you very much, Boo. Thank you, and good evening. Good evening to everybody watching as well. You come across animals. I've been doing this for a long time, not quite as long as the old man in the beginning, or Daryl, but I've been in the safari and the guiding industry for the last 15 years or so, and coming out of a lodge-based guiding industry, I've spent so much time with animals. You get to see lion cubs turning to sub-adults, turning to pride male lions. And you get to follow the story of a lion from beginning to end, and you see them battle, you see them succeed, and it's just such an iconic animal that it's probably the number one thing somebody wants to see. And then you come across an animal like this, which to put in words. Every encounter I ever had with this male lion was memorable. He would how do I explain it? So for example, when you came across him, he would so few of the times he'd actually be mingling with the pride. So for example, he was this loner, this bad guy. He had a certain look about him. And the first time I saw him was in 2012 in the Masai Mara in Kenya, which is where he finds himself. And he just always had this air about him, like untouchable, the bad guy in the pride, but the ladies loved it. So whenever you saw him, he'd be off on his own, and he'd get up and stretch and move around a bit, and he'd walk up to a female and he'd like just slap her, just like charge at her and like give her a hard time. And somehow they would like it because, I mean, he's such a handsome male lion. He is the perfect advert for like a shampoo company, or he's just perfect. Never do you see him and his mane isn't on form, and he's always got a posture, and he never mingles with the normal lions. And I'm not saying this and making this up. Many of the guys on here tonight have seen him and photographed him. Scar just is a different lion in his attitude, the way he carries himself, and that resonates with every single person that meets him. And social media has turned this male lion into the most famous lion in Africa, probably, dare I say, the most famous animal in Africa out of all the individuals around. He is so recognizable. I mean, there was a rumor of a lion called Scar that died a couple of months ago. And the internet went like viral with, is Scar dead? And everyone was asking in DMs and messages. That's the effect this lion has had. And it wasn't him. I think it was a lion in Botswana. But still, the moment the news came out, it was like breaking news. And I have not come across an animal with that much influence and just appeal. And being able to photograph him and feature him in the book is really special.
So Marlon, what I really love about what you're saying is that I think that when you do spend a lot of time in the bush, and particularly as a photographer, because you become effectively an animal ethologist and you have to be able to anticipate and understand so much of their behavior, you really start to appreciate the unique individual personalities of each different character. And you get to realize that actually a lion is not just a lion is a lion is a lion, right? Each one has their own character and their own personality and their own style and their own walk and their own look. And I just love your description of Scar as being that kind of ultimate bad boy lion, you know? I mean, aside from the fact that obviously he shares a name with the bad boy lion from the Lion King, there's just kind of that recognition of these unique characteristics of every personality out there in the bush. We as humans think we're so special. We're not so special. Everyone's got a personality.
Absolutely. And I think we love that. It's human nature to want to assign that human attribute. A lion that sadly got killed was a lion called Cecil from Zimbabwe. Had Cecil not had a name, that story perhaps wouldn't have had such a profound impact. And the same with Scar. He's recognizable. He carries that franchise from the Lion King and that bad character with him wherever he goes. And I mean, if you look at an animal like that, that is the way he looks there. That's what he always looks like. He is so photogenic. And he's the perfect ambassador for a species like the lion, as iconic as what they are. He carries their spirit, their name, everything a lion embodies. He has all those attributes. And in a world like today, where a book like this has to carry the weight of the story of a lion and the conservation effort behind him, I think an animal like that is just the perfect specimen. I'm so grateful to have been able to feature that image in this book with Margot, and being able to share a lion like that. I literally, I have a tattoo of him. I have a few tattoos, and I'll show you. So that is literally a tattoo of that exact same.
I've got to look down here to see it. No. Stand up again. Stand up again. We need you to flash a little bit longer. Oh, wow.
So
that's amazing.
It's the
and Marlon, you didn't go small. Okay, your commitment to putting Scar on your body was real. It was deep.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I've always wanted a lion, and I have a few tattoos, but it takes a long time, and I just had to have a tattoo that has weight and personal meaning, and nothing's better than Scar. He, if you think of his attitude in life and how he's still alive, that I think he's still a pride male. He still has females. He still mates. Like, how is it possible that a male lion at the age of probably 14 or going on 14, it's unheard of. Male lions, by the time they're 10, they're done. It's a tough life. And he's still around. I think he's with a second coalition. He's like the Rolling Stones. He just hangs out with the young people, and he just somehow makes it. How he's still around and still alive. Every year that we go to the Mara and I see him, I'm like, that's goodbye, Scar. It's been great. I probably won't see you in 10 months' time. And I said that in like 2015, and he's still there. How he does it, he's just a remarkable animal.
Wow, that must be a deeply emotional experience every time you see him. How extraordinary.
Yeah, and we're a few months away. Hopefully we can make it out to the Mara this year. We got some plans, and to get to see that guy again, and to share his story.
Now, Marlon, there are a lot of lion books out there. What has it meant to you to be involved and featured in this particular book, Remembering Lions? Because it is such an iconic book and such a different book in so many ways.
It is, absolutely, Boo. And I'm fortunate to have featured in quite a number of the books, apart from the Great Ape, sadly, and I just haven't photographed them at that point. But this one in particular, lions they're icons. They are animals that are, if you talk about conservation, if you talk about history, if you talk about symbols of power and strength, very little can compare to a lion. It's an animal that easily carries a conservation message. And I think to be involved in that, to be able to share, I think I had a couple of images in this book was a massive privilege. I've known Margot for some time, and just every time getting an invite to be able to be a part of it is special. And you got to ask yourself, how do I give back? And I think that's the biggest thing for me, and the biggest motivating factor for me is, how do I give back as a wildlife photographer? How do I make the photographs that I take count something for that animal? And I'm very active on social media and voice my concerns and conservation message as often as I can. But having an opportunity like this, to the scale and the extent that it has gone, 13-14 million rand raised, to be a part of that, and to know that the work that you capture can make an actual change to animals, to the teams that protect these animals on the ground. I think that for me has been the biggest thing, and why it's an absolute joy to be a part of these books, and especially a book as iconic as Remembering Lions. So, it's books that make a change. It's not money that goes into the air. It's money that goes onto the ground, and these animals are actually seeing the difference.
Marlon, thank you so much for joining us. I've loved talking to you, and I love that you could show us your tat and introduce us to a little bit of Scar's life. And hopefully you'll be able to get back to the Mara this year. And won't you send Scar all our love, please?
I absolutely will. Thank you. Thank you, Boo, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, well, the Remembering Wildlife series of books, which, as I mentioned previously, includes Remembering Elephants, Remembering Rhinos, Remembering Lions, and Remembering Great Apes, is now available in South Africa for the first time from today. You will also be able to pre-order Remembering, which is the brand new book in this fantastic series, and it will be coming out in October. I'd like to cross back to Margot Raggett just for the end of our broadcast now, because Margot is, of course, the founder of Remembering Wildlife, and the person who had this remarkable inspiration to start this series of iconic books. Margot, can you give us a little bit of insight into what from Remembering Cheetahs?
First of all, I just want to say thanks to all the guys for being on this broadcast. It's been really emotional for me, actually, hearing all their stories, and I'm so moved at the support that we get from the photographers. Without them believing and trusting in me, we'd have nothing. So thank you guys, all of you, for being here tonight. Remembering Cheetahs, we're printing in 4 weeks' time. So we're now proofing. The book is complete, and all the images, high res, are in place, and we're going to have a digital proof in a couple of days. So it's looking beautiful, I have to say. I think maybe, I'm a bit like a mother, that their latest child happens to be the favorite, but I really think Remembering Cheetahs has to be one of the most beautiful books we produce. So it's very exciting, but that's not out till October, so it's pre-orders now. But in South Africa, we haven't had the other books available before now, so that, to be launching there today is a dream come true for me, to kind of go from just being UK based to internationally. And there's been such demand from South Africa. Obviously, it's such a wildlife based place, and so many wildlife lovers there that for years people have been asking how can they get the books there. So I'm really excited that they now can.
And Margot, Remembering Cheetahs has already drawn so much interest. I mean, I know that just a few weeks ago, you were actually in Namibia, and you were spending time with Laurie Marker, who of course runs the Cheetah Conservation Foundation in Namibia. And she's doing extraordinary work with cheetahs and with the local community in helping them not be in conflict with the cheetahs, many of them and so on, with her incredible work. And I know that the two of you did a fabulous Facebook broadcast as well, an interview where you revealed the competition winners from your Remembering Cheetahs photographic competition. And I'm sure that many people will, remember that broadcast and really enjoyed it, as did I, because it was a real eye-opener as well to learn about Laurie Marker's work with the cheetahs and to know that your work in remembering cheetahs also goes to help fund the Cheetah Conservation Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's been an amazing journey this last 5 years for me with this series. But my favourite moments are always when we're actually giving money to projects that I know are doing great work. That makes it all worthwhile for me. Sometimes I'm, stuck on my computer in London thinking, what am I doing producing books? But when we get to give money to meaningful organisations, it makes a real difference. So yeah, with Laurie, we were able to actually spend time with the livestock guarding dog program they have there, which is a brilliant idea. They get these dogs embedded. They're specially bred Anatolian shepherd dogs, and they're embedded with herds, with farmers from a very young age. I think it's about 6 weeks they embed them. And these dogs just think of the herd as their family. And if anything comes along, I mean, we were there one day and a stranger came to the compound to ask for something, and the dog just went crazy. And you don't want to mess with the sound of that dog. So the cheetahs naturally will just run away if they hear the dogs, and that prevents conflict. So that program has proved so successful that they've got a 4-year waiting list for dogs. So one of the things that we're going to be funding with Remembering Cheetahs is actually trying to speed that program up for them and get more of these livestock guarding dogs out, which I'm very excited about.
Well, that's just one of the incredible programs. Thank you, Margot. That your remarkable project, Remembering Wildlife, this amazing series of books, that's just one of the projects that I know you support. And we've actually put together with HPH Publishing, who are your local South African distribution partner for the Remembering Wildlife series, they've put together a fantastic offer for local buyers. And the idea is that you can currently purchase all 4 books which are currently available in South Africa from today. That's Remembering Rhinos, Remembering Elephants, Remembering Lions, and Remembering Great Apes. And you can purchase all 4 books today for the price of only 3 of those books. It's an absolutely incredible offer. And do remember that all profits from the sales of the books go directly into wildlife conservation. Margot, thank you so much for being with us. I don't know if you have any final messages that you would like to share with us. I've loved spending the last hour with you and these incredible photographers. And thank you so much for the amazing work that you are doing.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Boo. And also thank you to Heinrich of HBH Publishing for taking on distribution for us in South Africa, which is a real game changer for us for sure. And I'm always thanking so many people, but I'd like to start with again thanking all the photographers, because without them we'd have nothing, and particularly the guys who've been on this call today. I really appreciated it. And then all of our supporters. So we fund all our books through Kickstarter campaigns. If we hadn't had a successful campaign this year, we wouldn't have had a book, and I really wasn't sure we would, given the COVID situation. So it's amazing to still have the support. So thank you to everyone who loyally supports our series, and to all the South Africans thinking of buying these books. Hopefully we've convinced you that they're beautiful, and that you'll know that you'll make a real difference if you buy them.
Thank you, Margot. And to all our viewers, thank you so much for joining us for the last hour. It is you who makes a difference in the world. And if you would like to purchase these books, please make your way to www.byrememberingwildlife.co.za. So much for being with us, and we will see you again next time.